Welcome, you're watching the NWR Virtual Investor Conference, August 2020. We've got Family Zone on the line, which is an ASX-listed tech company and an emerging leader in the fast-growing global cyber safety industry, aiming to support and protect every child's digital journey. Family Zone's unique innovation is its patented cyber security ecosystem, a platform enabling a world-first collaboration between schools and cyber safety educators as well as parents. Family Zone's unique approach is delivering rapid growth in the education sector, as well as through direct sales to parents. We'll now hand over to Tim Levy. Tim is a successful telco and tech entrepreneur. He founded Vodafone's largest Australian retail partner, Mo's Mobiles, and was the former CEO and COO of listed Optus reseller, B Digital Limited. Prior to working in commerce, Tim was a management consultant at Anderson's, working in tech and change projects across Australia, South Africa, Zambia, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. Over to you, Tim, with Family Zone's presentation.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks, everyone, for joining us for this unique and I think really well executed webinar series from NWR. The purpose of this session today is really to introduce new people to the story, give you a bit of a background on Family Zone and what we're trying to achieve, in particular in the US. And obviously for the many people who are watching, who have been following the story for a while, talk a bit about the great news that came out this morning where we announced a record sales period in July. Sales, in fact, that exceeded the entirety of the June quarter, which was a record quarter for us in any event. So without further ado, I'll get into it now. Okay, so as at the end of July, we've hit 1.5 million students on our platform. I think it's just over 1.2 million of those are contracted. We have, through our sales in the US, we have customers that try our product, and we call them POC trials, and so that's the difference there. More than 2,800 schools using our platform, and recurring revenue is now north of $9 million per year. In fact, this past month of July, we added $1 million of recurring revenue on its own. And you can see with the yellow dots there where we are in the markets. In Australia and New Zealand is our pilot markets, if you will. We've been working in these markets for about 3 or 4 years, and entered the US a couple of years ago where all the growth has been. We also have a small operation in reseller actually in the UK, 18 schools there, and that's something that we're thinking about expanding into in the probably the later part of this year. So our business model. So for those that don't know much about Family Zone, what we've built is, as Laura mentioned, we call it the cyber safety ecosystem. It's a suite of technologies that interoperate, that allow a child to be kept safe no matter where they are, be it in a classroom, on the bus on the way to school, sitting at McDonald's or sitting at home. We have technology that can be embedded on the device, in a router, in a school's network, or in the cloud, all interoperating to allow the school to take control during school time, and mum and dad to make their own choices after school. And that's the kind of unique thing about our platform, and it's really the unique thing about our business. And it's our entire focus is about it's all about that child, keeping that child healthy and safe and happy, and helping those wards of that child, those people responsible for that child, give them all the tools that they need and the insights that they need to do their job. So we have technology you can see here on the top left. We call it School Manager, which supports the role of the school function, the school administrator, the IT guy, essentially at the school or school district. And as you can see on that screenshot there, we have complete SSL decryption, complete visibility of what that child's doing when they're using school devices or on the school's network, so that the IT administrator can see what they're doing, can control what they're doing, can integrate with all the systems that the school would want to integrate with. And so that's a big part of our revenue stream, is actually solving those needs, the filtering needs, the compliance needs, and keeping the IT guy and those school districts happy. On the right-hand side of that is our teaching tools. We call it ClassWise. And this provides a teacher in the modern classroom complete visibility and control of what's happening in that classroom. The IT guy, on one hand, he can control what the teacher can control, but then he can offload responsibility to the teacher so that they can make gun websites available, or make social media or YouTube available during that class and only during that class. We also support technology that can sit on all devices, PCs, Macs, Chromebooks, Android, no matter what. And through that, we extend our offering to parents. So we have routers at home and the apps that mum and dad can use to control that technology and control what those kids are doing after school. That's the platform. And how all that turns into our business is described on this slide. So we have a direct channel where parents can buy a parental control product. So using our technology, just like our competitors, let's say a Net Nanny or a Custodio or Outpact or something, very similar levels of features. We'd argue that we're better, but really it's all about installing applications on kids' devices and protecting the kids, getting them to sleep, stopping them watching our material and so on. Our schools model is very different. What we do is we sell a compliance offering to schools that have a budget to keep kids safe and to protect the network. And in that, we get a recurring revenue stream. We call it our B2B business. Through that B2B business, which is driving all of our growth now, we then get installed on the student's device. Our then next challenge is to engage with mums and dads, to get mums and dads accustomed to the concepts of cyber safety, get them to potentially upgrade to a premium parental controls. In Australia and New Zealand, we're getting something like 40-45% of parents engaged in our platform, using our platform, which is an enormous leverage opportunity for us. So there's really two streams of revenue for us. B2B, selling a compliance offering and classroom tools and so on to the school district or school. And then finally, through our engagement models, getting access to mums and dads and helping them with their challenges outside of school where we get subscription revenue. So let's talk about the US. Our focus really is now on the US. We've entered that market a couple of years ago after some, I guess, successful trials in Australia and New Zealand, where I think would be safe to say we're the leaders of cyber safety technologies and education in these markets. And so we entered the US a couple of years ago through hiring a guy called Ross Young, who was the former head of North American sales for iBoss, which is the leading provider of cyber safety services in the US. And Ross has worked really hard for us for a couple of years in building out our suite of services and building what's really a very traditional SaaS business model, selling software as a service through school districts. Now, a bit about the US market. It's massive, obviously. 13,500 school districts, that's the public school system, 135,000 schools, 57 million students, and 83 million parents hanging off the back of those schools. The market is immense, and what's really attractive about that market for a business like ours is the regulatory environment around filtering adult content and funding of devices in schools. So firstly, filtering. There's a legislation called CIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act, which requires anyone who provides connectivity to kids blocks porn. So if you're a library or a school, you have to block adult material. Now, school districts in the US, they're funded by the local ratepayers and federal and state funding for various things, including technology. So the school districts are constantly searching for and seeking out funding, and through these federal and state funding models, they get access to technology funding, but that technology funding is predicated on CIPA compliance. So if a school district doesn't block pornography on the student's device or on the school's network, they put at risk all that federal and state funding. And if they don't have that federal and state funding, then they go to the ratepayers. And so you can imagine the pressure on these school districts to do this stuff well. Now that CIPA legislation has been around for 20, 30 years, and through that legislation has an industry has developed, which is incredibly efficient at delivering a device to a child and putting compliance technology, filtering technology, either on the school's network or on that student's device. And it's effectively done through this technology called device management, which Australian schools really don't use. But it means a company like ours, we can, and all these school districts have a budget for this, of course they do. And so we can go to a school district, have a phone call with them, demonstrate our product, literally deploy our technology in an evening across 50,000 students. A couple of weeks ago, we did this in a school district with over 90,000 FTEs, students on its register. Do it in a night, and that's deployed onto the students' devices, and the devices can't remove that. That doesn't exist in Australia. In Australia, they don't use device management. Most schools are funded by mum and dad. It's hard to get technology installed on them. But in the US, it's much easier. Device is delivered by the school. The technology allows us to deliver compliance onto that device over the internet, and the schools have a budget, and we never, in fact, ever have to go and visit the district. So the sales model is incredibly scalable. Oh, it's also important to add, it's all done through the channel. So there's a very well-established distribution network through value-added resellers, which means that you can scale up your product to sell into thousands of school districts incredibly quickly. You don't need to have order of magnitude increases in your BDM team to have order of magnitude increases in your sales in that market. Now, the products that are sold in education in the US, at the most basic level, it's content filtering, what we call compliance. Every school has to have it. Every school has a budget. Now, our industry has been layering new services on top to improve revenue, improve yield out of these schools. The most recent one is classroom management. So these are the tools that allow, as I've shown you before, allow you to virtualize the classroom experience. And these are the tools that meant that in the US, they've been able to enable remote learning to keep kids safe during COVID using technology like ours and our competitors. Again, that's not really used in Australia, unfortunately, because of the way that technology is deployed in the education system here. The next layer of product that we've got already in our stack, albeit currently it's free, and we're building on that with Matthew Stepka, the former VP of Google, who's joined our board recently. And these are the tools that are used by the pastoral care functions in the school or a school district to keep kids safe. It's about detecting mental health issues, detecting cyberbullying, risks, physical health, physical safety, and self-harm and harm to others. We'll also be developing and delivering through our application education tools that help a child navigate the internet and learn themselves, and obviously supporting parents in that journey as well. So scalable, massive and scalable channel, but also there's some unique aspects of the commercial and technology in that market that make it very attractive for businesses like ours. And so, you know, I touched on it before with the funding models, but with coronavirus and this mass, you know, when most school districts in the US now will be moving back to remote learning when they come back in August, September. The US government has, through an act called the CARES Act, injected over $13 billion in supporting online learning. Principally, that means tens of millions of more devices put in the hands of kids at ever younger ages, and a requirement for technology like ours to keep those devices safe. Again, it's about protecting those devices and ensuring future funding is secured. And so the impact of that has meant for our business that not only have we enjoyed the sales cycle in the US sales period, usually kind of kicks off in February, kind of goes through to July, August, and we've enjoyed the improvement of that the sales cycle, the improvement in our business, but we've also taken advantage of the fact that our reputation's building. We've been in that market for 2 years, and there's an enormous amount of activity stimulated by this coronavirus funding. Schools sending devices home, needing to put technology on them, needing to help parents navigate the challenges of cyber safety. So everything we've been talking about, everything that we've been working on for years is now incredibly relevant. And as we say here, strong market tailwinds for us in the US. So let's talk about how we're going. So we had a record quarter in the June quarter where we added about $1 million of ARR and over 200,000 students. And we've replicated that again in the month of July alone. So it's been an incredible month. Now that reflects the budgetary cycles in the US, where schools have now all of a sudden had their budgets set for June and they've got money to spend in July, and coronavirus funding and all the challenges of getting ready for the upcoming school year. And that translates into massive increase in the number of schools in which we serve. So it's now well north of 2%. I think it's 2.3% of school districts in the US are now clients of ours, with Family Zone now operating in 37 states across the US. So we're without doubt making a real mark, and we're very relevant in the US market. And that's translating into very fast growing recurring revenue. So just tipped over $9 million. As I said, we added $1 million of recurring revenue in the month of July alone. I can't promise that we'll do that every month going forward this year. As I said, there was a sales cycle impact there, but what we're seeing in the market at the moment is very healthy pipelines. In fact, if I go back a couple of slides, if you look at the grey boxes here, these are the schools that are trialing our product in the US. And as you can see, that the size of that grey box, the POCs, is still healthy. So we still have got a pretty solid pipeline of sales, even though the US sales period is kind of tails off into the December quarter. And one more sales update I think it's worthwhile mentioning is is talking about how all those sales translates into cash flows. And what you're seeing here is 3 years quarterly cash inflows, as you would see in our 4C reports. And you can see it's increasing every year, year on year. But in this June quarter, where we had a record sales period, we had a record increase in cash flow, 50% year on year increase in cash inflows. And that reflects the sales from the March period, which is typically a slow period in the US, albeit we did pretty well. But then, in the June period, we had a very big sales period, over $2 million of ARR signed in that quarter. And so you'll see that money flowing through in the September quarter and getting bigger from there on. So very confident with our funding now, given the capital raising that we did last year and the money that's flowing through these deals, in particular in the US, in the last few months. Look, that's really it for my presentation, but for the purposes of we're just giving people a flavour on the capital structure of the company. So as at the end of June, we effectively had $9.3 million of cash. That included the second tranche of the placement that we announced a few months ago. And that money came in the first 7 days of July. So effectively $9 million of money in the bank at June. We've effectively got $9 million of recurring revenue, and we've got funding that comes from the government R&D process. So we're very well funded, certainly within the existing business plan, where we're focusing on Australia, New Zealand, and the US. Market cap at 40 cents, $130 million, and a much more tightened register with a lot of volume going through our shares in the last couple of months. We've found that the top 20 shareholders are now owning a much greater share of the company. That's the team. I won't go through those in any particular detail, and that's really it for my presentation. Over to you, Laura. You there, Laura?
Thanks, Tim. That was really informative. You covered heaps of ground there. Got some questions that have come through on the chat line over the last 20 minutes or so. Jad wants to know if you can give us some more detail about the consumer offering strategy in the US and how you plan to reach maximum amount of parents through schools over there.
Yeah, thanks, Jad. Doesn't surprise me that Jad wants to know that. Yeah, look, so we've got enormous amount of activity in the B2B business there. We've started gently talking to a number of school districts about our community offering. That's where we provide content, material support, resources for parents, help the school communicate cyber safety messages to parents, allow parents to download the free version of our parental control app. We call that Insights. And so that's kind of getting going now with a view to us having a number of districts properly live from September, when they're all kind of, in a sense, getting back to school. This is a little bit disrupted, of course, with coronavirus, but those schools that we've handpicked are helping us with that process. But what Jad's really interested in, though, is when do we start leveraging the technology that's been deployed by the schools on those learning devices, and then offering parental control opportunities for parents on those devices. Now that's a bit of development work that we've still got to complete on that, and doing that whilst balancing the enormous amount of engineering required to support these big school districts that we're now talking to. So there's a balancing act internally. Where I sit on this at the moment is the B2B business is just such a great opportunity, and so our focus really is on making sure we're delivering sales and an addressable market of parents, I guess, through these schools, and chipping away, introducing the consumer products. It'll be live by the end of this year, but first quarter next year, all of those pieces in the puzzle will be in the market.
So the primary market is very much the US, and perhaps the secondary market you would say would be Australia. Has there been any interest from the private secondary school sector here in Australia? Obviously it runs a little bit differently, operates a bit differently to the one over in the US.
Yeah, it's very different dynamics here. We've found that the Australian schools, certainly in the public sector, are quite paralysed by coronavirus. They don't have the tools to deploy cyber safety technologies onto the BYO funded, so parent funded learning devices. It's very difficult for them to get technology like ours on those devices. And obviously there's a lot of kids in public schools that don't have technology at all. And so by and large, these kids that are going home are unprotected in remote learning situations, which is really sad as you compare to what we can do in the US so easily. In the private school sector, similarly, the private school systems are, I wouldn't say paralysed, but they've been working really hard on just dealing with remote learning, scaling, teaching the teachers, getting the learning management systems that you need to actually deliver learning at home and mark and take attendance and so on. And so those schools that have already got, device deployed filtering technologies are pretty much stuck with those things. Those that have nothing, those private schools and the Catholic schools that do not have technology on those school issued devices, we've definitely been in conversation with those. So it's in some ways slowed business down, in some ways it's stimulating conversations, but nothing like what we're seeing in the US.
Carlo is curious on that point, if there are any other substantial sized markets globally that are potentially similar to the US in terms of ease of deployment that you've seen over there.
Yeah, definitely Canada and the UK would be the obvious next targets for us. We're already in the UK with a small footprint. The primary school market there needs technology like ours. They're funded by local councils. It's pretty easy to get a footprint there. So our thinking is at some stage we'll turn to resellers in that market and trying to build a footprint and then build a presence. And Canada has a lot of parallels with the funding models and the structure of education as in the US. Ross Young, again, who runs our US team, he's got some experience selling iBoss into Canada, and he keeps badgering me every couple of weeks, can you get going into that market? So it'll come. At the moment, what we're really focused on is with the funding round that we completed, we promised the market that we'll execute in the US, and that's really what our focus is on. But if we hit a few balls out of the park, then I think that will change.
In a nutshell, and in your words, what is the key differentiator or competitive advantage of your product versus other content filtering tools that are available?
Yeah, I guess most people think at some level it's you're blocking a playboy.com, right? How different could it be? But really, what our focus has been on is making the job of that IT guy in that school district easy. And he's got a really hard job. He's supporting 30,000 devices. He's probably got 5 people in his team. The equivalent business would probably have 100 people in the IT team. So he's massively under-resourced, huge pressure, complex systems, admin people, pastoral care asking for reports on kids with issues and risks to health. Teachers are asking for websites to be blocked and unblocked, and all of that stuff is incredibly difficult. So our technologies, and why we think we're outperforming the market, is because we make that IT guy's job easy. All the integrations he needs, very easy to configure filters. All of our policy settings in the system are designed for lay people. Ross and his team in the US have a fastidious focus on delivering a great experience. So every single deployment we've had in the US has been a resounding success, and that builds more and more opportunities for us. So focusing on that IT guy, making his job easy, and also offering him opportunities to look like a hero, in particular with issues around cyber safety and suicide alerts and so on. Beyond the compliance offering, we then have a fully integrated, unlike, we're different to all of our competitors, our classroom tools and our parental control tools are completely integrated inside the same platform. No one else is anywhere near that. So it just allows our salespeople to talk to the IT guy and say, we can make your job easier and we can make you look like a hero because you can add these additional features without adding additional work to you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Tim. Just in the interest of time, we'll have to wrap up there. But of course, if your question went unanswered, we will pass it on to Tim. He will get it and he'll address it in the future.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.